What's up, everyone? Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, whatever you celebrate. It's your host, the white autistic Charles Barkley from the Drew Experience. And we're back today. It's not martial arts based, it kind of is martial arts, but I have my second political guest on the show today. He's running for the Conservative in the Westmount riding. He ran last time, came very close, I would say, to upending former leader Mark Garnosi, but now he's back with a new plan. He's young, up and coming. This is the future generation of conservatism. He's the one, the only from Westmount, Matthew Kaminski. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, we've kind of known each other. Like, you followed me back when I was like working and grinding minimum wage. Before anyone knew who I was with this show, I think you followed me, and I was like, all right, that's nice. And now here I am. It's not my full-time gig, but I'm in a better position than when I was when you first started following me.
Yeah, I think like when you realize that there's someone in the local community that's really involved in the combat scene and has a podcast, I find you tend to hear about it a lot more just because, especially in the Anglo part of Quebec.
Yeah.
So just seeing that as I was a combat sports fan was really enlightening to see because I feel like we're like a very limited community. So it was really nice to see that there was like a podcast out there that sort of dissected that realm.
Yeah, I mean, hockey's already taken. Hockey, there's too many. It's like, I don't want to be one of the many hundreds or maybe thousands because you have Spittin' Chicklets, who's basically the king. There's Missing Curfew, amongst a few others, but it's like, why do something that's already been done when you could try something that hasn't been done?
Exactly. And I just think that maybe this is a very, very personal opinion. I think that mixed martial arts and combat sports in general will just continue to get more popular over time. And I don't want to speak on other sports, but I just don't think that their growth curve and like their popularity is going to increase as fast as combat sports.
No, no, because the barrier to enter is very low. Whereas like in other sports, you have to have a degree. There's kind of the gatekeepers, and then they're so established that they're set in their ways, and they're not going to change anytime soon. Like, I love
Yeah.
hockey. I used to be a hockey savant. You can ask anyone that knows me. Like, I have like a binder of cards in the background there. Like, I have like '90s memorabilia that I could ring off like the top of my head. But I just felt like after the Sochi Olympics, I just kind of lost interest in hockey. I just felt like it's not going to change. Like, yeah, there's stars now, it's more skilled, but there's no personality like there was in the 90s.
No, definitely. And there's a lot of personalities in combat sports. And what's great is like you may have one personality on one team in like hockey, but you could have in one weight division like four or five personalities, and then two personalities could fight each other, and then it just makes it all the much more fun.
Very true. Very true. So yeah, so what got you started in politics? Because you come from a financial background, and for everyone who wants to know, when you hear the word conservative, stop assuming it's social conservative. With the whole abortion
Yeah.
pro life, because not every conservative is the same. I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm socially liberal on everything, but I'm fiscally conservative. So how did you get started in politics?
So yeah, the long story short is I was in CEGEP and I was always a fan of Stephen Harper, like as our prime minister. I just thought he was always doing a good job from at least a younger point of view. There wasn't anything to really complain about, and I just find that when people aren't complaining as much and they're saying that their main reason for voting for Justin Trudeau is because they just want change, I think that usually signifies that someone's doing a pretty good job. That they don't really have a big reason to vote for someone. But the one thing that got me involved in politics was in CEGEP. A guy that I was friends with came up to me and he was like, Matt, you like Stephen Harper. You have a lot of conservative principles that, when we talk, I notice about you. You should just come to this local riding association for NDG Westmount's like annual general meeting. And so I was like, yeah, why not? And then I came, I listened, and then they were looking for board of directors. So I volunteered myself to be a board of director. I served on there and then I joined their executive board and I slowly got more and more involved, spent a few years in there until the 2021 elections came around.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a phone call one day saying, Matthew, you've been really involved. If you wanted a good learning opportunity of how to be a candidate, how to run a campaign and how to learn about all the processes involved, just let us know. And I said to myself, that's a very unique opportunity, a big privilege. And so I at that moment, I decided that that was the way for me to get involved. So it was slow. It was a slow approach of getting involved, but it was like one step at a time.
Very, yeah, that's really interesting. You have to really start at the bottom, and then it just takes one opportunity, and that was during O'Toole's election. Now, I didn't vote for O'Toole because there's things I liked, but there's things I did not like. I just felt he was going back and forth, and that never goes well with a lot of voters. So, I mean, look, when you came up, like Candace Bergen was like kind of still in the interim leader.
Yes.
And still as the interim leader. So did you ever have it like before you started working with Pierre, did you have contact with Candace as well, or just Pierre was the one
No, so in that leadership campaign, I ended up voting for O'Toole. But very early on, Pierre had declared his candidacy. And so when he declared his candidacy, I supported him. And then he dropped out of the leadership race. And then from there, it was between Aaron O'Toole and Mr. McKay. So from there, I supported Aaron O'Toole. But for me, like really, I try to stay away from the leader as much as possible. And I try to focus on the policies as much as possible, just because NDG Westmount, the constituents there, they're not looking for a conservative leader per se. They're looking for their local person that they can call, they can email, they can speak to, and that they can rely on. So for me, even now, as much as I support Pierre and I even voted for him #1 on my ballot and everything like that, my focus will always be what can I do to help people. So just to answer your question directly, I wasn't as involved with the leadership team in Aaron O'Toole's era, but I am way more involved now with regards to Pierre's team, and I know a lot of members on his team.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see what he's accomplished, and obviously Westmount really, honestly, like I mean, obviously you didn't get the win last time, but at least it was a good learning experience.
Absolutely.
And now it's like what we're seeing in Westmount, because Westmount's normally very liberal. They've always voted Mark Garneau. Like I was like 7 years old when Mark Garneau that's an over exaggeration, but he's been like the face of Westmount. Then he stepped down. Then Anna came in, but what do you feel? Do you feel like it's open season now based on the last by-elections that are going on?
I would say that there's a very interesting opportunity here because you have a very strong NDP in NDG Westmount. You will have a very weak Liberal Party in NDG Westmount right now, and you have a very strong conservative presence in NDG Westmount. When you mix all those factors in, this is the first time we've had that trifecta of factors into consideration. Do I think it's leaning towards conservative? I don't think so. However, do I think with a lot of hard work, a lot of strategic marketing, a lot of the right type of events, do I think the conservatives can really come as close as possible? Absolutely. And I think the only person able to do that in the riding for the conservatives is me, because I've done it 2 times before. I've invested the time. I've taken the time to learn what people are looking for in a local representative.
That's really good, and that's really important because, as mentioned, you came pretty close last time.
Yes.
And obviously, I just, obviously Wyatt Claypool. By the way, shout out to him. He was saying he likes you a lot. So Wyatt you have support from Wyatt from the National Telegraph.
That's great.
That's awesome. He's like that guy's like a genius. Like the way he sees things and he breaks it down in such a way that he makes learning about politics kind of fun, actually.
Yeah, and I think what people need to also realize, like, and when I speak to people on the street and when I speak to people about politics for the first time, they think it's this very overly serious thing and you have to have prior experience or connections to get involved and stuff like that. Like, no, I mean, I've known people that literally had zero understanding of like how politics worked in Canada, but they wanted to get involved, and I've helped those people get involved. And I mean, even like, people like you, like who've reached out to me saying like, hey, I've never been really a political person in the past, but like right now I feel like I need to somehow contribute. That's already something that we need to take advantage of, and we need to help those people get involved.
Yeah, it's kind of like a similar situation like with Joe Rogan, where it's like, he's like a political orphan. I'm pretty open-minded, but when I see policies that don't help the working class Canadian, I mean, look, that's such a term thrown around now, like no tomorrow. So I got to be careful. It's like, I mean, a lot of us are earning a middle class, like a average salary. Like I earn about, like I make about like I mean I have like my hourly pay with like commissions for what I do. But looks like you lost.
Sorry.
That's all right. It's cool. We got him back. Don't worry. But it's just we're struggling. Like this isn't and you can't say, well, it's because of the pandemic and supply chain. Like monetary policy is key when it comes to like running a government, and that's where like whether you liked Harper or not, you could say what you want about his personality, but I was able to save money under his era.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think that just it comes down to what is a conservative agenda and what isn't a conservative agenda. A conservative agenda is we are trying to limit the amount of taxes you pay. We are trying to maximize the amount of money you take home.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to also maximize the amount of economic opportunities in the country. And we're trying to do that with the least amount of red tape and regulations as possible. That's like the mentality is like let people decide how they want to live their lives. Make sure that if they're working, that they feel like they are taking home as much of what they've earned. I think that's the idea, and that's what a conservative agenda is. Try to make the government as small as possible so that it interferes the least with people's lives. I think that's when people are the happiest, when they don't feel like the government is sort of just crawling behind them and taking their hard-earned money away. And yeah, and that's why I mean, I'm an accountant, right? Like, this is what I preach in terms of what I try to do. I want to make sure that our country is as economically and financially efficient as possible. And I think the only party that is equipped to do that is the Conservative Party of Canada.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, the liberals, like, the last time the liberals were kind of fiscally responsible is like, was back in the Jean Chrétien era, and that's saying something. That's like saying when the Montreal Canadiens were successful, pretty much. And it's like, and so for those old school liberals that are like, what happened? Well, the party threw all the competent people out. Now it's like the D list of MPs to, like, without giving names, basically. But it's just not what we were brought up to think. Like, as I said, if Chrétien was running the country, I think Chrétien would be considered a conservative today, by all means. If you think.
Yeah, and that's an interesting debate. Like, some people even ask, like, would John F. Kennedy have been a Republican in like today's type of world? You don't know. It's very hard to say like who would have been what. But I think Elon Musk posted a very interesting meme, or like at least just like a funny photo a while ago, and you should try to like look it up. But if you may know what I'm talking about. He showed like the center of the political spectrum,
Yeah.
and he was like, this is what being like the left has sort of just taken off in that direction, and people who are just center or center right have sort of just stayed in the same place. But now it's like the whole spectrum has shifted, and a lot of people feel like I thought I was part of the left, but I guess I'm not, right? So I think a lot of people are finding themselves in that sort of tricky predicament of, wow, I thought I was someone who was progressive, and now the Conservative Party seems to be the party I align with, and they feel a bit confused by that.
It's very true. The other thing too is that what also kind of made me more, I guess, not political, but in terms of just not being afraid of like saying I'm a fiscal conservative, because it's like saying you're a conservative was like equivalent to the C word. And now I think because of whether you hate him or love him, Donald Trump, like it's basically the victory is now basically a way to tell people, okay, you know what? Enough of this shaming of others, enough of the division. Like it's enough. It's enough. Like I posted a photo with my photo with Pierre Poilievre, which took a lot of courage because, obviously I don't want to get shat on, pardon my French, just because I took a photo with a politician of a specific party that you don't agree with. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person, because for those, as I said, like I'll keep repeating it. The reason why I would vote for Poilievre is just A, to build the house, because I want to own a home. I want less government involvement in my life. Like my parents didn't come to Canada or my dad's side didn't come to Canada for that. But also too, like what he's gonna do for like those like on the spectrum and special needs. Like when I say like I'm your host, the autistic white Charles Barkley, there's a reason for it, because as I do this, even I have trouble focusing eye contact. And the thing that Pierre wants to bring in, if people did some research, is he wants to bring in a bill that helps single families and those who are like economically struggling, for children who have like special needs, like autism and all that, to get the therapies to become contributing members of society. Because too much of what we've seen is they become a welfare recipient and they just become a statistic, and they can't utilize their potential. Like they're put in a box forever. And that's where I think the conservatives have an idea to help them become contributing members. And that way everyone's happy. Everyone's contributing to Canada in a sense.
I think you're spot on. Out of every Canadian politician that I've had the pleasure of meeting, the one politician that has been extremely publicly open of wanting to help Canadians with any special needs has been Pierre Poilievre. He's passionate about it. And not only that, not only is he passionate, I see he's sincere about it.
Hmm.
Not that he's insincere about other things, but like you can tell that that passion fuels his sincerity, and that's something that I really admire about him. And I also see that in his wife. I've met his wife as well, and I see that in her too. And she's great. They're both great. And no, you're absolutely right. I would love to see that bill be presented into Parliament and for it to be voted on.
Yeah, bring me in as an example too if you want. Once you guys win that majority, just like I'll come in there and like and present the bill as I can. I'll dress up in it's one of the few times I'll dress up in a suit to come and present it because I'm more of like a tracksuit kind of guy. You know, I'm trying to be active and comfy. But no, it's that's the thing too. Like not many people know this. There was an article about it that one of his kids is like semi or is special needs, but he doesn't talk about it that much because he doesn't want to like put a target on their back with all like with being in the spotlight. So it's really nice to see that someone's finally like saying the quiet part out loud. Like, what can we do to help those with special needs?
Yeah, and I think to a certain extent, if you haven't lived the experience before, it's hard for you to have that insight. I think that he and his wife understand what is not helping Canadians right now that do have any type of special needs. And I think they see that weakness in our political system and they want to bring a bill forward that would really strengthen that for all Canadians.
I think it's amazing. And, obviously, like in Quebec, we're lucky because when it comes to Quebec politics, like, yes, Quebec is more of like, as we call it, the nanny state, but they have done very well with those programs for those. So I got to give credit where it's due on the Quebec side, but the federal side, there does need to be improvement. So that's where I think it's very important, and that's why it's part of my reason to vote him, as well as owning a home eventually, because I mean, it's like we got to build the homes. It's like what, like it's like, and people say he's just saying slogans. He's just saying slogans, but that's not the case. The plan to build homes is not to buy federal land. It's just to like, what's the plan exactly? Because I've been to one rally, but then he kind of admitted it at a second rally. But what's the plan for building homes from what you know?
So yeah, there's a few different approaches. Number one is to sell a portion of the land owned by the federal
Mm-hmm.
government and to transform that into housing projects.
Okay.
And because the federal government has so much land that they own, but they don't use it for anything, or it's abandoned warehousing, or it's abandoned properties, just not being used to its full potential. I would say that's number one. Number two is they want to go to each municipality. Like, let's just take a city like Côte Saint Luc or NDG or something like that. And they're going to go to these municipalities and say, if you build houses quickly, we're going to give you federal infrastructure grants that are higher than you would normally get otherwise. Another example is if you have a city that says we don't want to build and we have all these zoning regulations and we have this and we have that, we don't want to build. We will look at those municipalities and we're going to tell them, well, unfortunately, you're not going to get as much infrastructure money next year because you decided to go against the federal government's plan to build houses. Those are just two different points. I think number three is we just want to tackle regulation as a whole and say, like, listen, we're building, and I don't know the exact years off by heart, but if you take like the mid 1970s, we're building just as many houses now as we did in the 1970s. And our population growth has been so high compared to then, and we're still building the same amount of houses. We need to make sure that we're keeping up with the amount of houses that are being built in the G7 compared to our G7 allies. We need to make sure we're building houses at the same rate per capita as they are.
That makes sense. There's a lot of options there, and like just for the zoning rules, it's gonna be. I'm sure there's ways to get around it, and to get the homes built, because at the end of the day, we always say, well, the provinces have more power than the federal government and whatnot. But like in this case, is this where like because we don't have a system like the U.S. So is there a way like where there could be executive action where like the government's, hey, you want like listen, we have a population problem. We're gonna build these homes whether you like it or not. If you're gonna put zoning in here, here's what's gonna happen. Is there gonna be that kind of game there, or are we trying to come in with like a soft approach to handle it?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, the structure of our government does not allow for executive action and in that sort of way. But what I will say is that there is a way in the Canadian system to, as an example, like the Liberal Party has announced a reduction to immigration numbers.
Hmm.
Right away, when you have a reduction to immigration numbers, you're going to have fewer people looking for homes. And when you have fewer people looking for homes, you're going to have more people able to, sorry about that.
Yeah, it's fine.
You're going to have fewer people also looking to get these homes. So I think the whole purpose here is we're going to use every tool necessary to build homes and make sure that there's the fewest amount of people externally that are trying to buy these properties, so that Canadians can actually buy a home. But another thing that's going to help afford homes is just reducing taxes so that people take more money home at the end of the day. I think that's what matters most.
Yeah, I was watching like Wyatt's show, and to paraphrase Wyatt, like when like the liberals are gonna say they're gonna cut everything, I think Canadians kind of want a few things cut right now when they see how bloated the government is. It's just become like when you look at the stats of how much public sector versus private sector, it's insane. It's as if we're turning into a G7 country only in name.
Yeah, and again, I'm not the leader of the party, but
No.
what I would hope that the Conservatives will do when they're in power is go to every single government supplier and company
Hmm.
and say, we are going to put your services at auction with all your competitors. And we want to make sure that for every government program and government service that we offer, that we are getting the best possible price. And I hope that they would just try to make it as economically and financially efficient as possible.
Yep.
And yes, a few things will need to be cut.
Hmm.
But I think the most important thing is that the government of Canada is being charged so much money from some companies. We need to make sure that the government of Canada is getting the best price possible.
Hmm.
And once we ensure that, we know that the government programs will be as efficient as possible.
That's the thing. I want efficiency, not like bloatedness
Yeah.
and red tape. It's just become like too much. And obviously another thing too is that I had to ask, because I asked Wyatt about this and I want to get your take. So the bill C-18, which is like the online news act, that bill, dude, that you guys have to axe that bill. That is like it's so dangerous, that bill, because it doesn't matter if you agree with disinformation or misinformation or not. But it's like when I try to look up something, it says you cannot view this on Meta because of the government of Canada's ruling. So is that something too um, that you guys are going to obviously look at to bring back freedom of the press in a sense? Because that's such a dangerous bill.
Yeah, I'll say two things. Number one is like in our list of priorities right now,
Hmm.
I don't think that's like in the top three. But don't get me wrong, I would not be surprised in the slightest if that is reversed or a bill is brought forward to amend it to a
Hmm.
certain extent very short after Pierre becomes prime minister. I just know that as of right now, based on what we have, I don't believe there's anything specifically
Hmm.
talking about that. But that's just because of the amount of damage that's been caused in other areas, right? And so, but I totally agree with you. Like if I were prime minister tomorrow, I would like get my party to completely reverse it ASAP.
Another problem that a lot of people aren't talking about is like the Senate, because right now there's like like a it's like a, they have a lot there's a lot of senators that have a liberal lean, and we're not like the U.S. We could talk about Senate reform, but this is the concern I have. You guys get into power, and then all the promises that you made are going to be either put in the mud, or they're going to be have to be reworked, because the Senate's going to say no, 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 because they have a liberal lean, unless the conservatives fill the Senate with conservative senators. Like, what's going to be the plan there if that happens? Because we're heading in a very interesting period right now. As the next election comes, it's a lot of pick your own endings that can happen. Like the Parliament could be prorogued, there could be an election come March. There could be a resignation. One thing I heard, which was really crazy, is they're going to do a leadership race while Trudeau is still prime minister, and then run that leader. It's kind of like a version of Biden versus Kamala, and Biden and Kamala in Canada. And I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to the Senate, I really wouldn't worry that much. I think like our majority will be so powerful based on what's about to happen here. I don't worry about that. When it comes to the leadership race, I just think Trudeau's been playing his cards all wrong, and I think he'll continue to play them wrong. From what I understand, Chrystia Freeland was supposed to resign nicely, and then Mark Carney was supposed to come in nicely. And then what ended up happening, I think Chrystia Freeland and Trudeau had a fight behind closed doors. She came out with that letter. Things sort of blew off the roof, the lid, so to speak. And from there, Mark Carney didn't want any part of it. He didn't want to join a sinking ship. He wanted a smooth transition into becoming finance minister. So I think what ended up happening, he's playing his cards wrong. He'll continue to play his cards wrong. And this leadership race is just going to be like a placeholder. I don't think any leader that comes in now. And I wouldn't even be surprised if Mark Carney maybe even takes a pause for a few years and lets another leader sort of just take the flames, because at this point, whoever's going to come in will need to make such a drastic shift. And I don't think anyone in the government right now will be able to successfully do that shift. They may just need to run behind the shadows for a few years and then introduce a fresh face. I don't think they're going to be able to do it as quickly as they want.
Are you familiar with a guy named Dan McTagg from the Canadian Affordable Energy? Like, he's a former Liberal. He's been coming out more and more. He has a theory that he thinks the Liberal Party is going to cease to exist and then merge with the NDP eventually. But that's another route. But I highly doubt it. I really think that the Liberals kind of want to keep the Liberal brand because they've been like the name brand since like before our parents' time. But I do agree with you that there's going to be such a rebuild that has to happen that it's just going to be placeholders until they get that person that can kind of bring it back to the Chrétien era style of politics.
Yeah, I think. Do I think it's possible? Sure. Like I've seen crazier things happen in this world. I will say that it depends on so many factors. Like how big is the conservative win in the election? How weak is the liberal results? I think you need to also take into consideration how strong the Bloc Québécois will be in Quebec. There's so many things to look out for. Will the Green Party pick up another seat or two? There's so many different things. Will the PPC lose a lot of its donation base? So many different factors. Do I think if the Conservatives won over 50% of the vote, do I think that the NDP and the Liberals would have to sort of discuss their futures together? Sure. I don't know if that would result in a merger, but maybe a strategic alliance for a foreseeable future, like sort of what they're doing now. Because right now, the Conservatives are on track to, by the time, if it happens in October 2025, I wouldn't be surprised if they got over 50% of the vote. And if they do that, they're probably going to pick up north of 225 seats, which would be
Unheard of.
Yeah, it would be like since uh, Prime Minister Mulroney. Yeah, like you haven't had that. So.
Yeah, and the thing is too, as you said, like to say like for anyone that come in to do drastic changes on the liberal side, they were part of all the government. Like for example, they like some would say, oh, they'll just from Dominic LeBlanc, he's good. Dominic LeBlanc was responsible for the Emergencies Act. He actually proudly admitted it at the caucus in New Brunswick. He's basically a loyalist. So I think anytime you're a loyalist to Justin, it's going to look very bad on you. So that's why I think Krista resigned too. Because even though she was loyal, she has leadership aspirations. But I mean, it was just, she just was so incompetent in terms of like how she overspent and all that. So it's just like, as you said, there's gonna have to be like a moratorium or a mourning period of like at least a few years to really see what do we want.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the only way that someone could successfully come from his government and say that I want to be leader and do well is bashing Trudeau really badly and saying, I had no control over this. It was all him, wasn't me, pointing the finger right at Trudeau and hoping that they sound convincing enough to get a lot of the liberal base back. I think the problem is Pierre's team is way too smart and they've been the liberals are playing checkers and the conservatives are playing chess right now.
Yeah,
And that's the thing.
unless like someone they can, but yeah, but the thing is the conservatives cannot get ahead of themselves. Like they have to really take it day
Work
by
hard.
day. Yeah, because and when it's an election year, it's gonna feel like an eternity. Like October is not far away, and if you're a regular person, but in politics, that's an eternity. And as I said, we could have an election in March for all we know. Like that's the thing.
Absolutely.
There's so many wild cards.
The most common question I get now is when are we having an election? I think that's the most common question. And I tell them, your guess is as good as mine. It could happen. We could have an election called in a week from now to happen in like a month and a half, 2 months, or it could just very well happen in October. And I have no clue. Every week, it feels like there's a different vibe in the air. And so right now, it's like you have to be ready to go to election battle. And we're ready for it. We're putting the pressure campaign on, and in the background, we're developing our policy platform. And our platform will be ready, and it will be a great platform. And then Canadians will be able to, instead of some people saying that it's all slogans, there will be 150-page policy document that will not be slogans. It will be very, very clear. But the reason that we don't release a policy platform right now is because, and this is something else that I'm asked quite often, is why would you release a policy platform a year in advance from an election. Why would you want other parties to see your party platform so early when they could easily just take the same policies and change a few words and turn it into their own? So
Same.
you have to be very smart. You have to hold your cards close to your chest. Pierre does say what the plan is, but the actual blueprints and the actual schematics for those plans will be coming out in our policy platform.
Amazing, yeah. And with that, I just want to also announce. So, as we all know, Neil Oberman is running in Côte Saint Luc, and obviously, I could support him. But I gotta say, I think Côte Saint Luc is open season now with the way House Father has really dropped the ball as an MP. So, I think honestly, I just want to say, like, I will be supporting you in Westmount. I'm gonna do what I can. I'm not rich. I don't have money, but I'll definitely see what I can do to help it get the upset to happen in Westmount. If we can pick up Westmount, if Côte Saint Luc falls, Westmount is open game. That's how I look at it. From what I've seen, like Anna Gainey is. I mean, I'm not saying anything bad, but I mean, from what I've seen, there's been a lot of questions about her, like in terms of how she's defended Anglo rights. Like, she wasn't really vocal with Bill. There was a few other things that really, like, it has people questioning, like, is this a serious candidate for a riding?
Yeah, you know what? From what I know, she's a very nice woman. I know she's educated, she's
Mm-hmm.
nice, she's a community involved person.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in today's world, that's not enough. I think we need someone that genuinely understands the problems that Canadians are feeling and is willing to be vocal and really stand up to the challenging issues that people are facing. And whether it be Anglo rights, being willing to stand against your party is something that I'm willing to do in the future. I don't know if she's willing to say the same thing on record, but for instance, when it came to Bill C-13, that was a very big bill, and I was willing to stand against my party and be vocal about it. At the time, she was sort of playing that wishy-washy game, which is I stand up for Anglo rights, but I have no comment on the Bill C-13 right now, that sort of thing. And I'm like, well, I was against Bill C-13 and I stand up for Anglo rights. So there's a little bit of like that dichotomy there. But I do think that we need someone that is willing to make hard decisions, someone that understands the problems, and that's someone that isn't so internally connected. Like, I'm not friends with the people in the Conservative Party at the top. I haven't been friends with Pierre Poilievre's closest circle. I grew up in Côte Saint Luc. I went to school in Montreal West, and then I went to school in Westmount for high school. I've been involved in this bigger community my whole life, and I just want to make sure that NDG Westmount has representation that is educated, is community involved, but is also willing to make the hard decisions of standing up against their party if need be.
Yeah, that's what you want. You want a leader that's tough and also brings in good economic policy, because at the end of the day, people vote with their checkbooks. I think in 2015 there was kind of that malaise in terms of like, oh, well, we have it so good, as you said in the beginning, there's not many problems, but we want change. And then 2019 it was, well, he was inexperienced, let's give him another shot. And then 2021 came in, it was like, we don't really want to vote because it's just so volatile with the pandemic. So
Yep.
it didn't need to happen, that election. Like, it did not need to happen. And then now it's like, I think after 20, when did you notice that the shift started happening? I think it started happening in 2022, like late 2022.
Yeah, so I think the inflation started in 2021, like it started right there. And then the inflation started getting worse and worse and worse.
Mm-hmm.
2022 is when I noticed people were starting to complain a lot more about Trudeau, but they were saying, well, I'm still okay now. I'm still feeling, whatever. I noticed a change in the air. 2023 summer was my by election.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that in the by election, a lot of people were saying, you know what, I'm not a big fan of Trudeau, but I still support the Liberal Party. I'm sorry I can't support you. That was like more
Mm-hmm.
2023. Now people are hurting so much and people are seeing how dysfunctional the federal government is so much that they're saying, well, and this is like a hardcore liberal. Well, I don't like Trudeau anymore. I'm not a big fan of the party anymore. I'll never vote conservative because I have never voted conservative. So maybe I won't vote, or I'll vote like the Green Party. That for me, someone who's a hardcore liberal, that's as good as it gets. So I think that we've seen this shift. And I think now we are on the road to getting 50% of the vote. I think if we get over 50% of the vote, that will be something really special in today's day and age.
That's amazing. Well, look, Matthew, you're really doing amazing and you're very well spoken. And the fact that you're willing to go against your party is something that we don't see because everyone thinks he has a muzzle on everybody and all that. And it doesn't work like that. It's okay. What I like about Pierre is I think the media gets it wrong where they think of him as this like dictator, but he's not a dictator. I think he's very fair, but he also wants to make sure that no one is like saying something that's out of line to the sense that it's going to give the Liberals or NDP a
Yeah.
talking point to like, you know, change a narrative when in reality it's like they're the ones that made the mess and they're trying to like say don't look here, don't look here, look there.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah, and so I think that the number one thing for at least me is that if there was ever a vote where the bill itself would not affect my constituents that much and I was being told to vote a certain way with my party, do I think I could have a whipped vote? Absolutely. But would I ever sacrifice the wants and needs of my constituents? That's where I draw the line, right? Like if there's like a fishery bill, and I understand how important the fisheries are to Canada, but if there's a fishery bill where the party is very, very divided and we're being asked to vote a certain way, I'll vote that way because for me, the fisheries don't affect NDG Westmount as much, right? But if we're talking about an Anglo rights bill, that would come when I would be an MP. That's where I would need to have a very difficult conversation with Pierre, with Melissa. I would need to get them into a room and say, like, listen, this is what my constituents are telling me. I can't go against my principles. And that's something that I like to consider myself a very principled person.
That makes sense. Speaking of which, with Melissa, like, yeah, you and her. I'm not saying you guys are tight, but she's done an amazing job as like helping with like NDG and Westmount and Côte Saint Luc. What has it been like to have her and helping you in your political journey?
I've met her a handful of times now. I think twice in Ottawa, once in Montreal. I could even be more. What I've noticed is that she takes the time to listen, but she's also like a boss woman. You know what I mean? Like she's smart, she's intelligent, she's successful, and there's no surprise to why she's the deputy leader of the Conservative Party right now.
Okay, so
So
she's the deputy leader. I thought it was Andrew Scheer actually.
no, no, no. So he's the House leader. So
Okay.
me or like I forget what it's called, but like when you're leader of the of when we're in the House of Commons, he's the representative of the House of Commons for the Conservative Party. So I believe that makes him the third in command, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, okay, interesting. Well, it's like, hey, listen, man. I mean, he put a woman as deputy, so they can't say anything now about him being sexist or whatever the label is. If they got, and on top of that, she's gay as well. So you can, so like, you really can't say anything there about.
Yeah, I mean, I've knocked on a few doors and people have asked me why I'm in such an anti-LGBTQ party, and I've just responded by saying like, have you seen members in our own party? Like, come on, you can't. You think these people are selling their souls just to be in the Conservative Party? No, you have to be realistic here.
I think what Pierre gets right is that he's including people that share the same vision for making a better Canada. Like
Exactly.
in terms, that's what I think. Whereas Aaron O'Toole, I think Aaron O'Toole was a nice guy, but to say this isn't your father's Conservative Party, that kind of hurt him because that also alienated a lot of other voters who might be socially conservative. You cannot alienate your base. You could disagree with some of their points, but you need them. You need to have allies. I would rather have an ally, Matthew, that's loyal to me 80% of the time than say an adversary that's 20% loyal but will stab me in the back 80% of the time. That's how I have to play it.
You're absolutely right.
And also another fan I'm a fan of in the Conservative Party is Michelle Ferreri. Like, oh, you guys have a lioness in her. So when this pod goes out and if she somehow gets to Michelle, keep up the amazing work as Minister for Children and Family Development because she's doing a great job and came from like a non-political background too. Like I've done research on I've done research on pretty much a few MPs like Lanceman. I've done a lot of volunteer work. You're an accountant. Pierre has been in government and he actually worked at my company starting out like before, like in like a really like at the bottom of the bottom, worked his way up and honestly he's done a great job. And you have Michelle too. There's others too. There's Andrews, like others too that I really like I love Barnett, by the way. Michael Barnett is hilarious.
What I like is that when I look at the Liberal Party today, I don't see, like, yes, there are successful people in there. I don't see future leaders as much. In our party, not only do I see strong people and successful people, but I see a lot of future potential leaders of the party. And that's what sort of gets me to say, wow, this is a party that is lining itself up to be generational, not just in the moment.
Very true. I think that's what I feel like, and I think just the inflation just helped a lot of people realize, like, hey, where do I want my country to be? How do I want to live for my kids to live? And it's unfortunate we have a lot of debt to pay off. I mean, I'm in debt too right now. I have to pay that off, but that's okay. That will be paid off. You mean, like but at the end of the day, we do want to make Canada what it can be. We can really be an economic superpower. No, we're not the first state. We'll never be the 51st, but we have to just unleash our energy because if you remember, when the Ukraine war started, Japan and Germany came to us and they said, we really need LNG, please. And all the Liberals gave them was maple syrup and a pamphlet on Canadian values. I don't know if I got that part right, but I know maple syrup was given.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that we just need to position ourselves to be that strength oriented country like we are in Canada. The problem is we've lost a lot of our foreign standing with other nations. The fact that Trump can even tweet towards Trudeau like that just shows how much he's lost respect for our country. I think with a leader like Pierre coming in, I think that Pierre will bring back that strength and that Canadian symbolism to the world. And I think the world needs that right now. It's sort of that peace oriented, open for business and just kind trading partner. I think we need to be that big force in the world right now.
Very, very true. And, to take it away from politics, because yes, it's been a political conversation. It's my second one. I got to say, I'm pretty good at this. And if anyone from the left wants to come on, it's an open door policy. Like, I don't just have conservatives on. I want to hear what you have to say. As long as you watch this conversation and see how Matthew talks, because I'm here to have a conversation. I'm not here to be spoken down to or at to. I'm a human being like everyone. But to take it to combat sports,
Yes.
obviously, biggest fight that happened in November, John Jones won. So I want to ask you, do you think the Aspinall fight will happen, or do you think he's going to retire? What's your thoughts telling
The
me?
latest rumblings are showing that John Jones was recently offered a large amount of money to fight Tom Aspinall.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fight will happen. I actually believed it would always happen. I think Jones sort of said, "Oh, I'm going to retire. I'm not going to fight Tom," as like a way to get Dana to open up his big checkbook and say, here's like an infinite amount of money, just fight Tom Aspinall. I think it might be one of the biggest fights in UFC history.
Mm-hmm.
I think I even have John Jones winning.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a controversial opinion. I think there's a lot of people that think John Jones would lose to Tom Aspinall. I actually don't think so. John Jones made Stipe Miocic look a bit like an amateur. One could say it's because of his age and that Stipe was washed. All I'm going to say is John Jones is a very unique human being. That's coming from a Daniel Cormier superfan in myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's the first time you heard it here.
Yeah.
Wow. Because I'm the biggest John Jones loyalist there is. It's like,
No, fair enough. Like, I just thought what DC was able to accomplish with his body type at his age, I thought it was super impressive. I was gutted when he lost to John Jones. I would say both times, even though one ended up being the no contest, whatever it is, what it is. I will say John Jones is a very, very special human being, just like Alexander Usyk is in boxing. I'm also a Tyson Fury super fan, so I was also gutted this past weekend in the rematch. But that doesn't mean I can't give credit where credit is due. Like when I look at people like John Jones or Alexander Usyk, these are people that are like one in a generation type of thing. They are goats of our era. So yeah.
I agree. For me, my GOAT list in MMA by division is, I would say John Jones is the perennial GOAT right now because of what he's accomplished. Like the amount of times he defended light heavyweight, and then he went up to heavyweight, took the time off, and look what he's done. Light heavyweight, I would still say it's John Jones. So heavyweight, light heavyweight is John Jones. Middleweight, I mean, there's an argument for Adesanya, but man, like Vintage Anderson, you cannot leave him out of the equation. Welterweight, it's a very controversial take, and I'm going to get a lot of flack from those in the karate scene because George does the same style of karate I do. But I think Usman is the welterweight GOAT. Just of what Usman did with that era of like how evolved the sport it became. He lapped the division. I think Usman is the welterweight GOAT. And welterweight, it's Usman, then George, and then I would say actually Matt Hughes over Tyron Woodley because T Wood he just wasn't a popular champion. I think it has to do with how you're remembered by the fans as well. That's a factor. Lightweight, Khabib and Penn, obviously. Khabib first. I can't say that. I can't. disqualify that. Featherweight, Aldo, and then Max Holloway, and now you got no. I would say Aldo, Volkanovski, and then Holloway, and then bantamweight. I don't really pay attention to after bantamweight, but I know flyweight. It's like DJ. I cannot discount
Yeah,
that.
yeah. DJ flyweight is undisputed. I will say Topuria has the chance.
Hmm.
I think that if his trajectory, if he keeps it up, could be something really great. It could also be a hype train. We don't know. It could just be he had a great performance against Volkanovski, an amazing performance against Holloway, and then something happens.
Yeah,
But Topuria is a bad man. You know, like he put Max Holloway down, and that's something we've never seen before from anybody.
right.
So Topuria excites me a lot. Pereira excites me a lot.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I think that he also has the potential to go down as one of our generational goats, depending on how he does going forward. If he loses again, then he sort of loses that momentum.
hmm,
But I think he will be making a move up to heavyweight in the next 2 years.
yeah.
And I think he will be trying to be our first ever triple champ.
Yep, I think so. I think he had, and I think you know what? I would put him at light heavyweight. I say John Jones, but I think Pereira too, because Pereira's already defended the belt 3 times, and then some could say, well, the division is very thin. You can't look at it that way. You have to look at it logically. He defended the belt 3 times, and if he beats Ankalaev, which could very well happen, then there's a conversation to say, listen, he might not have the amount of defenses as Jones, but he's got to be in there. And I think light heavyweights, if I look around Mount Rushmore for each division, light heavyweight, I would say it's John Jones, Pereira, and then Chuck Liddell for historical purposes, because Chuck Liddell was the first superstar that, before Connor, before George, before Anderson, before Jones, before Cormier, everyone needs to watch vintage Chuck Liddell. It wasn't the best era, but he put the sport on the map.
Yeah, no, of course. For me, I put DC there just because I loved what DC did in his reign as well. But at the same time, I totally agree with you on that.
I,
Chuck
I would
Liddell was crazy.
I would put DC
He
in
was
there
a,
because you know what? Yeah, DC wasn't a standout. I like him better as a commentator, honestly. Like he's amazing as a commentator.
well, I'm really happy that the UFC sort of saw that his IQ and his speaking skills were really good, and that they said, you know what, even though you retired, like please come in and help us and be part of the community.
Nice. No, it's very, very true, and that's the one thing that I think is amazing to see, and like he's done a great job. I just feel kind of after John retires, I don't know what's gonna happen with the UFC because I feel it's now an influencer kind of promotion. I have nothing against it. It's just not for me really. So I kind of follow it sparsely. You know, you get older, you have more responsibilities, but there's still a lot of talent. But I just feel right now it's like the next fight I'm gonna probably wake up for is John Jones Aspinall, and then Adesanya versus Imamov in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, that's great. I do know that I'm trying to think. There's another fight. I mean, Pereira and Ankalaev. If that ends up, they say that it's not happening next, but if that were to happen, that's a huge fight. I think
Yeah.
that will be Pereira's biggest test to
Hmm.
date, besides Adesanya.
I agree.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree. So Matthew, what's I mean, obviously you're in an election campaign right now, getting ready. But what's the plan as well for 2025? Since you're an accountant, are you going to be putting tax season aside for your clients, or do you still have to keep that obligation going too as an accountant?
Yeah, I think for me right now is like I still need to go through the internal process with the party to like
Hmm.
officially be confirmed as the candidate again, because you have to do it every single time you run. You
Hmm.
can't just say I was the candidate last time, I'm the candidate again. So I have to go through that process, but I will be speaking with the party very soon, going through that process, and I've made the sacrifices before and I'm sure I'll make them again.
Amazing. And where can people connect with you if they want to like look at your look at like what you've done, what you're up to?
Instagram and X are the two biggest platforms I use. I think they're the most active right now, and I'll continue to be on those platforms.
Amazing. All right, guys. Well, if you like these conversations, make sure to hit the like, share, subscribe button to the Drew Experience. It's on all platforms. Any support helps and whatnot. So, Matthew, I got to say thank you so much for coming on today. It
Thank
was a
you.
pleasure to finally do this and break the ice finally.
Awesome. And listen, we'll have another talk again
Yeah.
soon.
Oh, for sure. All right, guys. Stay kosher. Happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Kwanzaa, whatever you all celebrate.